Right, well, my clock says 1 o'clock, so as soon as we're all here, I think we should make a start. So hello, everybody. Thank you for coming along to this session on equality and diversity at the bar. And thank you very much to our panel for coming along to speak to you this afternoon. I'll just quickly introduce everybody. My name is Jane Hutton. I'm one of the joint heads of online learning at the ICCA, and in my former life at the bar, I was a criminal practitioner. We also have Patrick Ryan, who is the other half of the head of online learning at the ICCA, also a criminal practitioner, who will be fielding questions in this session this afternoon. But we are very lucky to have a really distinguished panel this afternoon. So we have Mary Pryor QC of the 36 group. We have Jamie Hamilton QC from 9 St John Street Chambers in Manchester. And we have Rahana Popal and Jamil Mohammed, who are both at 33 Bedford Road in London. Now, we had a quick chat in advance of this session, and we thought, given we're talking about equality and diversity, why have boring traditional introductions? So the first question that I'm going to throw out to the panel is one to do with really their backgrounds and whether anybody in their family was actually involved in law prior to them becoming barristers. Before I throw the question out to the panel, though, I'd just like to say that Patrick will be fielding questions. Please make sure you type any questions into the session chat, because that will be specific to this session rather than the event chat, because that will probably get lost in the melee. Panelists, if you're not talking and you see something in the chat on the side that you really want to jump in and answer, feel free to join in with the chat. So, Jamil, going back to the question that I asked, did anybody in your family have a connection to the law prior to you joining the bar?
The first, I mean, I may have some family members that have had probably some run-ins with the law at some point, but no one actually that thought they'd become a lawyer. So I'm the first.
So how did you then become a barrister and decide to enter the field of law?
I mean, the truth. There's the truthful story, and there's like the more fun story. The more fun story is that I saw it on, like, you know, on those movies and thought, yeah, I want to do that. But the more truthful story was in school. I was like super, you know, argumentative, and one teacher just said, look, if you're gonna argue this much, you might as well get paid for it. And it just that stuck, and it was that simple. And then he said, become a lawyer, become a barrister. And at that point, I didn't know what a barrister was. And then he said, look it up, and then that was it. I was set.
Fantastic. So, Rahana, how about you?
I don't have any family connections to the law. My brother had a friend whose friend was a barrister, and that's where I got my very first mini, and I was 16. That was my tenuous connection. But no family members in the law whatsoever. I'm the first, and I think I'm only the second. So my older sister went to university before me, and I'm the second person in my family, certainly in my father's entire generation, that's ever gone to university.
So what made you seek out a career at the bar then?
Oh God, mine is a typical story, as you would have said. I think I was 9 years old, came home, my brother's watching telly. I was like, who are those people in wigs talking? He goes, oh, they're barristers. And I said, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a barrister. And I wrote my whole life on a Post-it note. I said, I'm going to study politics, and then I'm going to do law. I'm going to become a barrister. I'm going to practice in human rights and immigration. And that's what I did.
Fantastic. Mary, same question to you then, please.
I can trace my occupational roots back to 1732, and I can tell you that on both sides of my family it is coal miners or coal miners' daughters, so absolutely no connection with law whatsoever. Fortunately, although we lived in a council house, we didn't need any lawyers for any of us who may have got into bother, and so I knew nothing about the law. I knew nothing about going to university. Why did I become a barrister? I think probably because when I was 6, my dad broke his back in a mining accident in the pit, and I was so convinced he was going to die. I used to sleep next to him for about a year, and we had a person who came into our house who spoke down to him, and it made me angry. And I think I decided then that I was going to speak up for people. Not sure I knew that was being a barrister, but I knew it was speaking up for people.
Brilliant. And Jamie?
Well, at the time that I went to university, almost exactly the same time as I went to university, my cousin went to prison for 9 years for armed robbery. So I think that was the only other connection that my family had with the law. But I was state school educated, went to university, and chose to be a barrister because, like others you've heard about, I saw it on the telly and thought, that's for me. And the big thing for me, the lesson that I've learned subsequently, is the fact that I was state school educated, first generation of my family to go to university. I never felt like that was holding me back. And I think probably there you've got the very definition of white male privilege, because I had no idea that things could hold you back. So so my route into the bar was not a difficult one, but it wasn't Oxbridge and from a family of lawyers.
That's a really good point, Jamie. How about the rest of you? Did you feel that your route to the bar was more difficult or easier? I'll throw that open to anybody.
Personally, if I'm being honest, I think it was a little bit more difficult. I still think it's difficult, even not just getting here, even staying here and being here has its difficulties. But the only thing I'll take or I'll give in relation to that is that it's doable. So whilst it is difficult, it's doable, it's achievable. I'm literally living proof that it can be achieved. And I didn't have the sort of background that I would have thought you'd need to become a barrister. I don't have the speech I would expect from Oxbridge. I didn't have the leg up. There's no nepotism. It's a bit of luck, but a lot of hard work. But I genuinely, if I can do it, I promise it can be done. That's the thing to take away from that.
Mary, you're nodding along there.
I am nodding along. I think I worked out fairly early on I had the intellectual ability to do it. I had a thick northern accent and quite poor social skills, which were perfectly plain. And I think that is quite difficult if you don't know how you're meant to behave or how the people around you are used to behaving. That can be a little bit tricky. I am a mother of 5 and I went to a polytechnic and I did it. So I suppose in the same way Jamal is living proof it can be done, I'm living proof you can do it with a family and you can do it from northern working class roots. But it wasn't straightforward. I think it required resilience and a lot of stubbornness.
Do you think things have improved, Mary, since the time that you joined the bar to nowadays?
I think they've improved. Certainly, I don't think they're better, but I think they have improved. So I think it is much easier for people to join our profession. One reason is that you can now get a paid pupillage, whereas when I finished the bar course, you had to pay to do pupillage and to live. So that's been a tremendous difference. I think a lot of chambers and the Bar Council and institutions like the ICCA, who I think are have done groundbreaking work in equality and diversity, the administration of that and admission policies now mean I think that we are getting high caliber candidates. And what is important is the quality of you as a person rather than where you started in life or what colour you are. But there is still much to do.
Well, you have a real interest in this area, don't you? Because I know that you're a Bar Council social mobility advocate. So perhaps you could explain to the attendees what that's about and what the Bar Council is trying to do to improve things in this area.
The Bar Council is trying, by getting people to tell their stories, to show that anyone and everyone is a welcome member of our profession, and that there are many different ways that you can get there. So you can get there by doing law as a first degree. You can get there if you're the first person in your family to go to university or study law. You can get there if your grades weren't particularly good, or if you're a mature student, or if you have a disability, or if you have any obstacle. You can get there, but you must work hard and be a person of high caliber. And some of the stories of the people who have become social mobility ambassadors are astounding. We have people who were refugees, people who were homeless, all sorts of people with all sorts of difficulties, and we have all made it. And so the aim of this programme is to show you that you can, and to be ambassadors to help people who perhaps don't have anyone else who might be able to help them into a career in law, to have a point of contact.
Rahana, are you also involved in that work?
Yes, so I was last year I was a social mobility advocate for the Bar Council. So every year they change. So there are about 6 or 7 individuals. I was last year's social mobility advocate. It is an incredible project. It shines light on individuals who, again, are from non-traditional backgrounds. And as Mary's referring to, it's from a whole range of individuals. My story, I'm a child refugee. So my parent and my family came here. I was a child, but English at that point was like my 3rd language. My parents spoke no English, none of my siblings did, and started off in a council estate, state school, learned English, the whole thing, and worked my way up. So I feel like what Jamil says, I'm living proof that you can do it if you are determined enough to do it. And I still feel that as a female, that imposter syndrome. I sometimes look around, and when I get to go, I'm like, oh crap, what am I doing here? They don't know that I'm like acting like a swan, but pedaling like crazy underneath, because I have no clue most of the time. And it's kind of flag it till you make it. That's how I feel. But I sometimes need to kind of remind myself, no, actually, you've managed to get pupillage, you managed to get a scholarship, you managed to get through everything. So yeah, maybe you do belong here. But I think as a person who doesn't have a lot of other individuals who either look like you, or that many, the vast majority of the pupils or people that I've dealt with in chambers are always men. And so you always feel this sense of belonging. You're not quite meant to be there. And I think that's the hardest part when you're a junior member at the bar at the moment is, do I belong here? Are they going to figure out that I'm not meant to be here, and actually there should be a white man in my place instead? And this is why diversity is so important, because if we can get more people.
Oh, have we lost Rahana there? I think she's frozen for a minute.
I think she has.
Yeah. Jamie, I was going to come to you next, actually. So we'll come back to Rahana if she unfreezes at some point. So again, you're senior, you're a silk. When you joined the bar, did you feel that you were somehow entering a club that was unlikely to welcome you, and how did you deal with that?
I never felt like I wasn't welcome at all.
Yeah.
And that was because when I joined my chambers, there were probably 30 members of chambers, and the vast majority of them were white blokes. So I fitted in straight away. One of the big changes that's taken place over time, when I joined chambers, there were basically 3 women. And I used to talk a bit in chambers about the fact that wasn't particularly good representation. And more senior people used to say to me, no, that's not right. And there were 2 former High Court judges, 2 former members of my chambers who'd gone onto the High Court bench, who were both women. And I used to have to point out to people that meant you had to be truly exceptional as a woman to get into our chambers, whereas there were a whole bunch of mediocre white blokes who were never going on the High Court bench. Over time, now our recruitment in chambers from me down is about 50-50 male to female. Still very poor, I think, in diversity terms, in terms of ethnicity. We're still predominantly white. And so I think there's been quite an improvement in one respect, and we've still got a long way to go in others. And I firmly believe that visibility is very important. And seeing that the bar is open to all is really something that's an essential part of every barrister's duty, I think, to make sure that the bar is open and to make sure that people can see that we are an open and diverse profession committed to getting better.
How good a job do you think the bar is at doing that, Jamie? I mean, we were talking in our pre-session discussion on Thursday about a particular tweet that caused a bit of furore on legal Twitter last week about, you know, the way a barrister's supposed to look. Does the bar do itself any favours in the way that it portrays itself as a unit to the rest of the world?
There are times when we do it very, very badly. There are times when we do it very well. There are some initiatives that work really well, and you know, the Bar Council, the CBA, they all do very good things. There's a lot of individuals who do individually a lot of very good things. I am not convinced it's taken seriously enough at a chambers level across the board. And in reality, that's where it has to be. You know, my chambers, I like to think my chambers is very much part of the community in Manchester. And I very much view my chambers as, I always tell them that I feel like they're a family business. We're a business, but we're family with each other. And we, I think, have got a duty to go out there and show that other people can be members of our family. I don't think we do that very well at the moment.
Jamil, what are your thoughts on this? Oh, is Jamil now frozen?
Oh,
no,
I'm
you're
here.
there. Sorry.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how well the profession does as a whole to really say, look, we're here, we're inclusive, we're diverse? Does it do a good job?
No, I don't think it does a good job. I think there's been a lot more lip service as of late, and I think sometimes there's this disillusion that talking about something is actually making change. There's not enough change. Granted, it's become sort of more in the forefront, but we're not really going to have the answer, in my opinion, for a few years. We're not going to know how this change has been implemented, if it's been implemented, until later down the line, once we start seeing diversity and stop having to talk about it because it becomes the norm. This has been raised in the past. It was raised before I got into the bar not too long ago, and before that, those that got in before me. Yes, we're aware of it, but it's just not enough change, and it's not happening quickly enough. So yes, it's somewhat at the forefront, but it's just too little, and that's, you know, my view on it.
How much do you think that at the level that we're talking about, so you guys are looking at recruiting pupils to chambers, we as an institution are looking at admitting postgraduate students to a course. How much has that ship sailed by the time we get to the potential candidates for those student places and for those jobs? Because obviously this isn't something that you can wave a magic wand and have loads of people with 2 wands, because, you know, there's that competing interest, isn't there, between trying to be as accessible as possible, but also ensuring that the people you take on have got the possibility of going forward and doing well in the career that they've chosen. What would you say about that, Mary?
I think the key for our profession is to take expert advice on this, because we are lawyers. We are not equality and diversity officers. We don't have training in psychology. And I feel really glad that my Inn, and I know the ICCA have done this as well, have employed professionals who have set up the application form process, given significant training on the interview process, so that where we can make a difference, we do make a difference by ensuring that it is transparent, fair, equal and diverse. It needs to be done a lot earlier. Of course it does. We need to be doing this from about the age of 5 onwards, but as a profession, we can only deal with what we can deal with, which is probably 13 plus. And what we are doing, I think now, with the work that the inns are doing and the work that lots of chambers are doing, is becoming accessible. And one of the things that COVID has given us is this ability to interact with people all over the country at the touch of a button. And that, I think, has enabled us to speak to a lot more people about diversity and to show others and to inspire others. The fact that Jamil and Rahana are here as barristers talking today will no doubt inspire lots of students who are watching this to realise that it can be done, because they have actually seen someone do it. And we can only do a certain amount at the moment, but absolutely all chambers must, it's my opinion, instruct someone properly to look at their interview processes, look at their application forms, look at their recruitment policies to ensure that they're taking the very best people, not just more people like us.
Absolutely. I know we were hoping that we'd get some questions to deal with, and suddenly we seem to have a flurry of questions coming up down the side. So, Patrick, have you spotted any questions that you think would be useful for us to deal with at this point?
I'd like to throw this in, because obviously we've talked a lot about gender diversity and ethnic diversity at the bar. I'd like to throw this question in from Michelle. As a wheelchair user, obviously I can't not disclose my disability, but the recent report out about disability and law has added to my concerns about progression. Is change happening is the question.
Does anybody want to jump in? Yeah, Rahana.
I think it's Michelle. I'm dyslexic, and so I've always, whenever I had my application process, everything, I would just declare my disability. I would almost wear it as sort of a badge of honor, because I used to say it allows me, my disability, being dyslexic, allows me to think in a different way, because my experiences are not the norm. It gives me a unique perspective. So I might not be traditional, but that's an advantage, and that's the way I always coached it. In your circumstances with a physical disability, that's a whole different kettle of fish. I am not going to lie to you. For example, if I just take King's Bench Walk and the entrance is there, most of the chambers, to get into the first level, you have to go through a flight of stairs. None of those, or I think only one of those buildings there, have actually a lift from the outside. And so there are very, if I say stupid, they should be stupid at this point in time. We shouldn't be having buildings that don't have access. That's just ridiculous in my opinion. But the reality is, yes, there are going to be physical barriers, whether or not that's you being able to access chambers. And I know a whole host of courtrooms that are entirely unsuitable for a wheelchair user. They're beautiful courts, they're historical courts, but they're totally unsuitable. So this is going to be the reality, one of the difficulties that you will face. My advice to you would be, A, do your research, B, absolutely disclose it, and you should disclose it. But C, if a chambers wants to take you on and they are genuine about diversity and inclusion, which I genuinely do believe the vast majority are, it will not be a barrier. They will find a way to make it work. There are absolutely inspirational stories about barristers who are in fact blind. The bar, gone off to have phenomenal careers at the bar. And simply because you are in a wheelchair doesn't.
Oh, I think we've got a frozen issue again. Sorry, does anybody else want to? Oh no, you're back, Rahana. Sorry, you froze, I think, for a few seconds there. Could you just finish off the end of your answer, please? Yeah.
I don't remember what I was saying. I think I basically was saying that if you persevere and declare it, and you create your own plan, and that's what I did. I created my own plan and how I was going to tackle this. So if you know your practice area, what you want to do, when you're faced perhaps with that difficult question in pupillage interviews, have the answer ready, because you know what the plan is and you've organised yourself. So I can't lie, it will be difficult, but it won't stop you, is what I'm basically trying to say.
Does anybody have anything to add to Rahana's excellent answer to that question?
I think it depends where you want to practice, Michelle, but I don't think you'll find anywhere near that level of difficulty on circuit, because many of the chambers are modern buildings, all with wheelchair accessibility. And also many of the courtrooms are new, and there is wheelchair access, I think, almost entirely on circuit, certainly on the Midland circuit. I can't think of a court building where you can't get into easily. So there are all manner of ways that you can deal with this, but it is their problem, not your problem, would be my advice. Chambers must and courts must make their buildings accessible. And so it sounds like a them problem, not a you problem. And what you need to do, if you can see going to a courtroom, is to just email in advance and ask them what the solution is. I think every court has a solution for wheelchair users. I know, as Rahana was saying, a particularly wonderful guy called Fayaz Khan, OBE, is on a judge now, who is completely blind and has progressed the entire way in this profession on the Midland circuit, actually. So I think that for most sets of chambers, we would be delighted to welcome you. And we know that our disabled members really do make our sets better places.
Right, thanks, Mary. There was a question about unconscious bias, which I think, Jamil, you addressed briefly in the chat, but I suppose the question was pretty short and to the point. It was, how do you deal with unconscious bias? But I'm wondering if the questioner meant, how do you deal with perhaps facing unconscious bias, or how do you yourself deal with making sure that you don't apply unconscious bias? So perhaps we could look at both aspects of that. Who wants to jump in on that one? Yeah, Jamie, brilliant.
In relation to recruitment, and I've been involved in recruitment in chambers for a very long time, from being a very junior member of chambers, and undoubtedly there is the temptation to think to yourself, well, I reckon I'm a pretty good barrister, and therefore you look for people like you. And the very obvious downside to that is you don't just recruit very good barristers, you also, if you happen to be recruit bald Mancunians. I mean, it's just the danger is always that you look for similarities, and the thing that you've got to put at the forefront of your mind is to look for qualities rather than similarities. So it's the things that show that people have got the potential to be an excellent barrister, not just they remind me of me or they remind me of X, and therefore they will be a good barrister. And so we've instituted things in chambers such as a proper marking scheme, things like that. The thing that we are far behind on, and I agree entirely with Mary on this, is actually professional help in relation to that, and proper training in overcoming the barriers of unconscious bias. What I've done in relation to it, I've slightly stumbled across over time, but I do think that the bar should have far more input from professionals to assist us in overcoming unconscious bias. And I think it's one of the principal problems of creating a bar that can look just like you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as Patrick mentioned in the chat, all of the tutors who work at the ICCA, we had to undergo specific unconscious bias training before our selection event, and it can be quite eye-opening. Do your chambers run similar training, particularly for those who are selecting pupils and tenants, say? Mary, you nodding?
Absolutely, yeah. They do. Absolutely. We as a set of chambers, instructed a chartered clinical psychologist with expertise in recruitment, equality and diversity to set up our recruitment system and to set up our questioning and training for interviews. We redact names, we redact universities. When we see candidates who have to pass a particular marking structure, which does take proper account of the different ways in which people come to this profession, and give marks for social deprivation and any form of disability. When we do interview, we interview the people who are of the highest caliber. We're not really interested what university they went to, and we're not really interested particularly in what their journey to the bar was. And that, I think, is at the moment the very best that we can do. Have a system of double checking on our marking structure. So if anyone has slipped through the net and is, subconsciously looking for people like them, then we spot it fairly quickly. I have the great privilege of being in a set where our last head of chambers was a black male and our current head of chambers is an Asian female. And I'm very proud of that, because when people come to apply to us, they come to apply to us knowing we're doing more than lip service.
That's really good to hear. Rahana and Jamil, do your chambers operate a similar policy when it comes to selection?
If you look at our chambers just generally, and you look on the website 33 Bedford Row, you can actually see that it's quite a diverse set as it is. And I think, so yes, is the short answer. We do make efforts. What I do think generally, though, is that when you start looking at chambers and an idea of where they're going, this is my personal view, is the top end is going to be the top end. It's predominantly white because that's how the system went previously. Start looking at the junior end and how it's coming through, and if colour is filtering up from the bottom to the top. That's how I start to look at it and see if there's initiatives towards change. It's all well and good even having a few phases of colour just dotted around the place, or even some at the top just saying, yeah, we've got some for inclusion, but start looking just generally how the mix is going and if it's across the board, and that might give you an idea of how seriously Chambers is taking diversity. But again, that's just my view.
Yeah, and obviously you can only talk about your own experience of your own chambers, but there's quite an interesting question here, which I think feeds on what you said, Jamil, which says, considering that the most top 30 chambers predominantly or exclusively recruit Oxbridge graduates, does the panel think that more chambers need to adopt measures that mitigate the impact of indirectly discriminatory hiring practices? So it's all very well saying, well, we just want the best of the best. Intellectually, we don't care where that comes from. But if inevitably that means you come from a particular place, that's not helpful, is it? Rahana?
Yeah, that's one of my very big frustrations. I once sat on a scholarship. I sit on the Inner Temple scholarship interviews where we all have to go through unconscious bias training as well prior to us sitting on the interview. But I remember sitting down, and this is an insight onto a panel discussion, and we were talking, and this wasn't about a candidate, but just general chit chat. And one of the interviewers said, well, obviously a 2-1 from Oxford is going to be better than a 2-1 from London Met. And that just made my blood boil, because I was like, what? On what planet is that the case? There's a reason why there are standardized grades throughout university, but that's the kind of level that you're up against, this perception that if you go to a particular university, you must be clever, or it's implied cleverness. That's a huge problem. And yeah, you have sets that exclusively have recruited just Oxbridge candidates in the last, since their existence. My advice to those people, what I did, because I am not Oxford or Cambridge, I went to City University, etc., did the postgraduate degree in law, is I didn't bother even applying to those sets. And that's the truth. That's what having those kind of chambers there with those kind of profile mean. Me as a candidate, I would never apply to them. I picked sets that were exactly what Jamil said, at the junior end, had diversity, and had sets that had candidates who looked, sounded, and had backgrounds like me. And I thought, that's where I'm going to apply. And there's one other point that I want to make, and it's a question put by I can't pronounce his name, I'm really sorry, Atunda J. And I just want to say, you absolutely have a chance of making it. From what you've written, you're an incredible candidate and you'll be an asset to the bar. Just because your background is diverse, that is not a reason why you can't get in. That you absolutely can. There's not even a slim chance, you've got a strong chance.
So just to put that in context, thanks, Rahana, that's a really good response to that question. So the question was, do you think that diversity and equality has progressed to the point that a person with a foreign name, Black, with an accent of some sort, a career changer, coming into law after a few years in a totally different field that's not law, middle-aged, but with outstanding academic achievements, has even a slim chance of obtaining pupillage? So you're saying go for it, Rahana, yeah? I think a couple of you had already responded in the chat. I think, Jamil, you had as well.
Sure. I'm trying to respond to as many people as I can.
I know you're doing a brilliant job. Thank you so much.
Jane, can I throw in a question that came in a little bit earlier that may have got lost in this? We've had a flood of questions, which we'll try and get to. But Aishath, a little earlier on, asked, we've seen an increased diversity of applicants and junior members of the bar, but there's still a big issues with upward mobility within the bar. In other words, the higher up positions where people are less likely to be drawn from a diverse pool. In your opinion, or in the panel's opinion, what can be done to address this particular barrier to diversity?
Quite a difficult question, because there's not a quick fix answer. All I can say is, and I keep talking about the junior end, my personal approach is trying as best we can not to live in the past and work towards the future. And at the process now, you're seeing people like Rahana and myself who are at the junior end. Although we're at the same set, there's more people beginning to look like us in chambers, and we're saying working towards getting to the top and staying at the top, and then showing that it can be done. The only issue with, I would say, in relation to this is that the practice areas, there is some sort of, I would still say that there is a bit of a bias in terms of what you see in different practice areas. The publicly funded bar appears to have more diversity within it, thankfully. Still not enough, but more. And I think talking about it, the ICCA putting sessions on like this is beginning to bring it to the forefront of people's attention. I would love to say there is an answer that if we do this, then going up in the profession would be the result of it. I don't have the answer. I really don't. But I know that the work we're putting in, speaking to people like Mary Pryor QC just the other day, and her views and what we can do to make things better, gives me so much hope that people in a top position aren't just forgetting that anybody is difficult down there below, and speak to people, tell people how you feel, and don't internalize it like we used to do, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, great. Mary, do you want to come in on that as well?
I am a working class northern girl who went to a polytechnic. I didn't go to a university, and who had a very long route to the bar, and I am a QC. So I am a small example of the fact that you can get there. That is not to be taken as any kind of sanction for very few women and diverse members of our profession who have got there. There is much to do. There seems to me to be 3 ways that we can deal with this. The first is for those who have reached these levels to make sure through outreach work that they explain to people how they got there so that they can see it's possible. The second is for people like Rahana and Jamil, who are busy practitioners, still giving up huge amounts of their time to demonstrate to students that they have got there, and they are working their way through this process in order to continue to shine and gain further status, as in with QC or with judge or senior counsel or wherever they end up. But the real amazing work they do by coming onto meetings and speaking to students is invaluable. I think it's far more valuable than a photograph on a website. Seeing real people, being able to interact with real people is absolutely crucial. And the third aspect, I think, is the institutions, the universities and the bar course providers, who must, I think it seems to me, make sure that when they are taking on students, they inspire and encourage them to progress by having people in who have gone through the process and come out the other side. So having people in to speak, not because they're working class or disabled or diverse, but just because that's the norm. What I would love to see in this profession is I'd love to have a chat with someone who doesn't think it's odd that I'm a working class girl who's a QC, so that I was being chatted with just because I'm quite good at my job. But almost we're not there yet. We're not even close to there yet. And the saddest thing for me is when I see real high caliber students who say to me, I've been told by a member of the bar not to try for this profession because I'm brown, I have an accent, I wear religious clothing, I'm working class, I have a disability. And we somehow as a profession have to stop our own members doing that. Life is hard enough without us putting people down.
Absolutely. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, just to come in on that.
Oh, sorry. Jamil, go for it, and then we'll have Jamie.
Just to come in. Yeah. Sorry, cool. Just to come in on that. Again, I make the point that I am proof. Like, I was told at times it's going to be so difficult. You're not, there's only certain amount. 1 in 10 get an interview for pupillage, and from then, how many people of colour are going to get the pupillage? Look, I did it. Like, genuinely, I did it. And if I can, you really can. I know it sounds so cliche, but it's just, I can't stress enough, it's so achievable because I achieved it.
Jamie, sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to, there's a way in which the answer to the question in some ways is a time machine. So if we can go back in time and make the bar diverse to its entrance 25 years ago, we'd see more diversity at the higher echelons now. And, look at my circuit. We had the inspirational Rose Heilbronn, who gets name checked time and time again as an inspirational female practitioner. She was leader of our circuit. It was 47 years until there was another female leader of our circuit. Looking now across the circuits, there are 6 leaders of the circuits. 3 of them currently are female. The danger is not to be complacent about it, because for every step forward, there is the danger that you become complacent and say, well, look, we're doing better, or look, the answer is what happened a long time ago. And so that's why the bar have got to keep on at it with outreach, but also with not just looking to the people who are going to be in those positions in 30 years' time, but by mentoring and supporting people who are currently at the bar and saying to them, this is a career path for you. So the diversity doesn't just stop with recruitment. It goes on to saying to people, apply for Silk. There are so many white men who apply for Silk, but there are so many people who don't apply for Silk who are just as good as those white men. And we need to concentrate on providing programs, mentoring, encouragement for people who don't have the benefits that I had of the sex or gender I was born into and the colour of my skin, to say to them, you have the ability, don't hold back from applications. And that's where I think at the moment there's a bit of a bottleneck. It's encouraging the people who represent a more diverse profession to then go on and actually apply for the positions that get them that degree of seniority and higher degree of visibility. And I think that's one of the areas the bar's got to really concentrate on for the moment.
Rahana, do you have anything to add on that topic?
No, but I did want to answer one of the questions by, I think it's by Kimberly McCann, which went up a long time ago, about which inn to apply to and what to look for. I applied for the inn that A, had a lot of money to give, and then B, who were interviewing every candidate, because I thought my background meant I probably wouldn't make it through an application, to a paper application sifting process. I knew I'm better in person, not so great on paper. So I picked an inn that was interviewing every single candidate, which was in a temple at the time, and it was the only inn to do that. And so for you, what I suggest is look at your background, look at your kind of achievements. If you think, actually, I'm very strong on paper, I can make it through the sifting process, then apply to an inn that necessarily does a sifting process and then interviews. Because if you can get through to the second round interview stage, your chances of probabilities massively increase. If you're like me, who doesn't read amazingly on paper, I'm okay, I'm not Oxbridge, etc. So I wanted an interview. I picked an inn that was guaranteeing me an interview, and then I made sure I could wow them in interview. So it's up to you. I also picked the inn, again, with the most money, so that the probability of me getting a big award just increased. I think the only inns to carry out a guaranteed interview process is Middle and Inner. Grays does not, and I don't think Lincoln does. They are doing a sifting process, but I can be corrected on that. So those are the factors that I would suggest you take into account when you're applying, when you're picking which inn to apply.
Sorry, just to put that into a little bit more context, Rahana, I think you're talking about in scholarships there, obviously. So we've got lots of undergrads here who may not actually even be studying law yet. So just to explain that in order to study the bar course and to become a barrister, you have to join one of the 4 inns of court. And in order to do that, you just have to demonstrate that you're a fit and proper person. That's not a difficult hurdle. However, in addition to that, all of the inns have money that they can give you for either the bar course and or pupillage. And so that could really help out, because they are significant sums. They can cover the entire cost of the course, plus living expenses, and also give you somewhere to live in non-COVID times when you're actually allowed to go places. So that is excellent advice from Rahana. You really need to think about that when you're applying for your inn, and do your research before you join. Jamil, I know you mentioned something about Gray's Inn, so I don't know if you'll be able to tell us about the scholarships at the moment.
I've actually not looked into the latest round of scholarships. There are scholarships available at Gray's Inn. Forgive me, I probably should have done some research on that.
Fine, I'm Gray's Inn too, and I don't know, which is why I chucked it over to you. But Mary, did you have the position? Yeah.
Can I help? Yeah, I'm involved in both the interviewing for scholarships for the BPTC and for pupillage, and also the GDL. We do not interview everyone. There's a good reason for that. We interview people who we are likely to give a scholarship to. We redact universities. We redact names when the sifting process is done. And so it isn't an inn at Grays, and I don't think any of them actually, to be fair, are inns where whichever university you have gone to matters. You will find nowadays, if you apply for a scholarship, you will be asked some questions which are evidence-based questions about problem solving and about advocacy, because what the inns are interested in, and I think this is across the board, I don't think it's helpful for any of us to say, you know, join this in, because we all have our own benefits from our own inns. But what they are all trying to do now is to find the people who are likely to make a success of a career at the bar. And that isn't always those who've got first-class honours degrees. It is people who have got the skills that are required. So, for example, at Gray's Inn at the moment, you can get scholarships up to, well, I think there's a scholarship that's about £20,000, and you can also get a residential scholarship. So they will pay for your accommodation whilst you study either the BPTC or you go through pupillage. So each and every inn has its own abilities to provide monies. It has its own scholarships. It has its own community. And I was on a joint Zoom chat not so long ago with the 4 inns of court. And what I can tell you is they work really well together as a unit. They don't see each other as competition. So what I would say is go, and if you can go and look at them or look virtually at them, see the sorts of people who are benchers there, see the sorts of people who are making success, see what they're doing. People choose their inn for all sorts of reasons, but I don't think you can make a mistake whichever one you join. They're all really great places, and they work collegiately together. So I sometimes teach at other inns, other people come in and teach at ours. It's a great.
It turns out Jamie is also great, but I should point out other inns that are available. It's very unusual to have 2/3 of a panel being from Gray's Inn. We have been given our 5-minute warning. Unfortunately, this session will end automatically at 13:50. It's very strict like that. And I think it'd be nice to end on a bit of practical advice, because we had a question from a student which says international students don't often have the same work experience opportunities as UK students. And I think also perhaps people who don't come from a legal background with lots of connections might also face this problem. And this person feels like it might put them at a disadvantage. Do any of the panel have any opinions on how this could be combated? So what kind of work experience, what kind of experience could you use to put forward your applications? Jamie?
As somebody who had never done any work experience or many pupillage before becoming a barrister, what you need is relevant experience that demonstrates the competencies that are required to be a barrister. And I would focus far more on getting those than just ticking boxes saying I've been on mini pupillages. I see application forms of people who've done 10 mini pupillages. It makes no difference over somebody who's done 1 in reality. Concentrate on displaying the competencies required for the profession and not so much on getting a list of work experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And just putting that list down without explaining how it has either piqued your interest or improved your competences is an absolutely pointless exercise anyway. Jamil, I know you had a good answer to this one in the chat, so I'm going to come to you now.
I think use the experiences you've had to try and to tailor them and show that they'll be applicable in what you're seeking to get. When I had the pupillage interview, I know we've not got long, but when I had a pupillage interview, they didn't ask me about any of the legal work experience. They asked me about the non-legal work experience more so. And mine was bar work, and it was dealing with drunk people, dealing with everybody, and dealing with problems. So, for example, they said, what would you do if something, they asked me, what would you do if a drink ran out? We upsell a different drink. And those sort of things, to be able to answer questions like that, are things that I would say that you can include in your application. Just make sure it's tailored. So show that you're problem solving and show that you're doing the things that are necessary to be a barrister and a competent barrister.
Great answer. Mary, anything to add?
Make sure you can talk to strangers, find your way around the country, learn to be nice to everyone you meet. do whatever you can find on LinkedIn or Twitter. Join any kind of online mooting session if you haven't got any at university. Make connections with people who you see doing law, and use what you have got. Don't be ashamed or embarrassed that you haven't got 15 mini pupilages. Bar work, waitressing, everything like that is far, far more important. Be yourself. Just be
Brilliant.
you.
And Rohana, I'm going to give you the last word. We are technically on 13:50, but let's hope we don't get cut off.
My advice would be is make sure you hit the headline points. We are always looking for people with advocacy experience or written advocacy. So whether or not that's you working in a council, answering questions for, I don't know, constituents, for your local MP, whatever, that's written advocacy. And be able to identify kind of barrister skill sets that chambers look for, and be able to use your non-legal work experience to cross-reference to demonstrate that I've got that experience. Whether or not that's you working in a youth club to say that you can work with general members of the public, right the way up to kind of written advocacy work with you writing application forms or doing talks like this or whatever it might be as oral advocacy. So my advice is always cross-reference experience in and outside the law to demonstrate that you've got the skill set.
All really great advice. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming along. Thank you so much to the panel. I feel like we could have talked for twice as long, but unfortunately we're going to get kicked out any second. So thank you very much. Thanks for answering all the questions in the chat as well. And I hope that all the attendees have found it very useful. I'm sure they have.